Hi, I'm Jeff Tilley, the founder of Music by JT, and this is the Weekly Note. This is a weekly music feature that Music by JT is going to be putting out. It's going to be available on Facebook and on YouTube, and generally this will come out on Sundays, and we'll have a variety of content on here. It will include tips on playing certain instruments. We'll talk about current music. We'll talk about classical music. We'll talk about how instruments work and even look at musical history. So, sit back and relax and enjoy this week's Weekly Note. And with that, I'm going to make my picture a little bit smaller and just tell you a couple of things. The first is that what you're hearing in the background as music on this particular episode is Pachelbel's Canon in D major. It's one of the most famous pieces in classical music, composed in the 17th century for string ensemble, including continuo cello and other Baroque instruments. And we're going to be looking at the Canon in D for a different reason in just a little bit. So, this week's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about how acoustic guitars work, and we're going to talk a little bit about this week in classical music with some videos that will give you the music that I'm talking about in terms of what the historical significance of this date is with respect to that music. And if you didn't understand that, that's okay, because I just kind of rambled on for a second. It'll all get clear as we go along. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to turn off my Pachelbel, and we're going to move on to the next topic, which is how acoustic guitars work. Now, once again, I'm going to expand the circle here and actually make myself full screen so that you can see what I'm going to be demonstrating with is an acoustic guitar. Here we are. This is a 3/4 size model. I have small hands, and so an acoustic guitar, they come in half, 3/4, and full size. And half guitars are good for children. 3/4 size are also good for children, teenagers, and adults like me who have teeny tiny hands as far as adults go. But otherwise, we're going to switch this a little bit so that you can see a little bit more of the guitar without me being on top of my desk that I'm doing this. And yes, you're seeing this in my home office. It looks messy. Maybe we'll have a background sometime in the future. Maybe we won't. For now, we have the guitar. So a guitar is a stringed instrument. Strings now are tuned generally in fourths. There is an exception here. There is a string that's tuned in a third, and those are musical intervals in terms of how many pitches are involved. A musical third goes from a G to a B, and that's 3 pitch names in terms of the standard set of pitches that we use in Western music, which go A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And the strings on a guitar, modern acoustic guitar, are steel. In fact, they've been steel since sometime during the 18th century when they started to transition from gut strings, which catgut, other gut, that had been on guitars since they had been invented much earlier as a descendant of instruments called the lute and the theorbo, and there will be a theorbo later on in this particular episode in one of the videos that we'll show. So the strings go from up here at the top, and at the top of the guitar, which we call the head, we have these pegs, and there's some different mechanisms that can be used for these pegs. They are a little differently structured on this guitar than you see on a modern orchestral string instrument like a violin, viola, or a cello or even a string bass, although string bass has a similar setup in many modern string basses, where the pegs here, they're not really pegs that you stick into the neck, but there's a mechanism here which involves tension, and you're winding it back around the spool with each string, increasing and decreasing the tension, which is one way to raise and lower the pitch. The basic pitch, say, of this bottom string is an E. If I wanted to change that basic pitch, I would change the tension on the string by turning it either this knob either clockwise or counterclockwise. So I'm not going to demonstrate that today. I don't want this to go too long, but that's one way that you can change the pitch. The other way is to press on the string with a finger. And for guitars, they have these structures on the top of what's called the fingerboard, called frets, and the frets are stepped a half step in pitch apart from each other. So this is an E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, oops, A, B flat, etc. So you get these each a half step apart on each of the strings, and I can give you a... I don't know how well you can hear this. It's a little far from the microphone. So as you press down on the string, you are basically preventing the string from vibrating above where your finger is. That changes the length of what's vibrating, which results in an increase in pitch. And even if you don't have a guitar, you can actually do a little bit of an experiment with this with a sturdy rubber band and stretch it and pluck it. And if you listen very, very carefully, rubber bands don't make very much sound at all, you might hear slight differences in the pitch that the rubber band makes as you stretch it or as you allow it to fully vibrate. The thickness of the strings plays a role as well. These strings, this is an E, that's an E 2 octaves above, same length of the string, but this is a much thicker string. And so the frequency that this string vibrates is less or lower than the frequency that this vibrates. And I know you can't really see this on the camera with the webcam. You would need a very high resolution, very zoomed in ability to understand, but I'll try to hold it a little bit closer. You can see that sort of vibrates in a wah, 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 wah. And I know that's a technical musical term. No, it's not. I'm just making it up. And this upper E string, if I bring it up, it vibrates. It has a quick first vibration, which is kind of wide, but then it gets very, very narrow to the point where your eye has trouble following it. So these are all the ways that you can make pitch with the guitar. And as you get farther and farther down on the fingerboard, the length of the string that's vibrating continues to decrease and the pitch gets higher and higher. Now, the strings extend from the head. They're suspended just above the fingerboard. They come down to a bridge structure. It's similar to a bridge on a violin, viola, or cello, except that then it is basically anchored much closer to this actual bridge. But the whole function of, and I've been talking about it without showing it to you, so here's the bridge and where the strings are actually anchored. And the function of this bridge is actually to allow the vibration of the string, which is what really creates the sound, the string vibrating. It transfers it here to the soundboard, and because it's hollow, the sound can actually come out after it's been amplified by the soundboard. The whole function of the soundboard is to amplify the sound so that you don't have a little tinny thing like you might hear by plucking a rubber band, but you actually have a very robust tone. So you need all these parts. You need the string to be under tension. You need to have the ability to shorten the length of the string on the fingerboard. You need to have the bridge to transfer the vibrations to the soundboard, which vibrates, and the opening here, the sound hole, allows for the amplified tone from the soundboard to come out and freely escape into the air. So that is a very quick and dirty discussion of how a guitar actually works. And from this point, we're going to take a short break. I'm going to reset the screen from its current formation of being full screen back to a full circle, and we'll talk a little bit about this week in music history. Okay, we're back. And so now we're going to talk about this week in music. And there's so much in the world of music you could possibly talk about in terms of music history. With each of these episodes, I'm going to pick a genre and talk about some things, events this week in that genre of music. And we're going to start off with the genre which was here first, classical music. Other weeks we'll do rock music, country music, blues, jazz, etc. But for this first episode, we're going to pick classical music. So there's three things that took place this week in classical music. In 1933, August 30th, which is tomorrow, Monday, there was the premiere of a piece by Samuel Barber, which helped cement his reputation as an orchestral composer, called The Overture to the School for Scandal. And if you've never heard of it, I'm not surprised. I hadn't heard of it either. I had to actually look it up and do some research on this today before producing this episode. And The School for Scandal is actually a comedy. It's what's called a comedy of manners. It's a particular genre of comedy which was done in a satirical style to basically poke fun at manners and social conventions of the day. It was very popular in Victorian England. This particular comedy was written by a playwright, Richard Brinsley Butler Sheridan. Yes, I'm reading that off of another screen to the side of you. Don't have that memorized. Who lived between 1751 and 1816. And The School for Scandal is one of his better-known plays. And because it's a satirical comedy, it has a light-hearted spirit. And as a result, Samuel Barber, when he decided to write an overture to it, there was no music that went with the play to begin with. This was just something that intrigued Barber, and he wanted to try and write something orchestrally that captured the mood. So you're thinking light comedy, almost a farce, making fun of all sorts of social conventions. The British television show Keeping Up Appearances is another example of this type of comedy in many respects, although it's not exactly the same. What we do have is a link to a YouTube video, and these are on my Music by JT YouTube channel, which I've just put together, and these are going to be put together in a playlist. A separate playlist is going to actually have these episodes in them, so you can go back and rewatch if you want. But we're going to listen to at least a little bit of this particular piece. Maybe. Okay, the YouTube is coming up, and there may be ads, so I apologize for the ads, but it looks like we're going to get away without an ad. Let's listen for a few minutes. have some playful figures by the strings, followed by some woodwinds. Brass comes in. Okay, and we're moving into another section, so it's been a couple minutes. The entire piece is over 9 minutes long. It did win Samuel Barber, who is much more famous for his Adagio for strings and Agnus Dei, which was used as part of the film score for Platoon back in the day. Very famous score in that respect, but Barber wrote many, many other things. This was one of the things that put him on the national stage, and it did win him a prize at Columbia University in 1933. All right, so we're going to go and come back to the next event this week in classical music, which is actually on Tuesday, August 31st, but in 1848. And this was the premiere of the Radetzky March by Johann Strauss I, who was known for writing both marches and waltzes. And the performance we're going to see, this is a march you have probably heard before, but it is a march that the conductor and violinist André Rieu, the Dutch violinist and conductor, who founded the Johann Strauss Orchestra, plays very regularly at concerts both indoor and outdoor. And one of the hallmarks of this orchestra, the Johann Strauss Orchestra, sorry about that, got a little tongue-tied for a second, is that they get outdoor venues for their concerts. They're very amplified. They're very much big productions. There's dance. You will see dance in the excerpt I'm going to show you. You will see a huge, huge audience. You might think you're at a rock concert. You're not. You're at a waltz and a march concert, and sometimes other classical pieces as well. So we're going to listen a little bit to the Radetzky March, if this link will work for me.
Hi, I'm Nicole Hockley from Sandy Hook
Unfortunately,
Promise.
here is an
I'm
ad.
Nicole Hockley from Sandy Hook Promise. The shooter's hard to murder, but it's
Alrighty,
important.
I am sorry about
The
the
shooter-
ad. It's an important topic, but you can go back and look at that some other time. So here is the Radetzky March. It takes about the first 2 minutes of the video. And that is André Rieu leading the orchestra from the front and himself playing. And they have an ice rink that they have ice dancers coming out and putting on other dances as well. And you can see the whole crowd preparing for the occasion. Too bad he doesn't really come and tour in the States very much. They tour all over Europe, however. Ice dancers and the ballroom dancers. The orchestra pretty much has this memorized. While the cellist can look out into the audience and still play it correctly. This is one of this orchestra's signature pieces. Alright, you can hear the audience applauding. We'll stop it there, or almost at the end, even though the video goes on for about a full minute of standing ovation, etc., etc. So let's move on. Finally, the last event for this week in classical music takes us back to 1653, September 1st, the birth of Johann Pachelbel, who wrote the canon in D that you heard in the background as we started this particular episode. And the canon in D it has been performed in many different ways and many different arrangements. This one is from an early music group called the Voices of Music that's based in San Francisco. And they are playing on original period instruments from the Baroque era, which include violins, violas, and cellos that are similar but not identical to modern violins and violas. We won't talk about the differences. There is a Baroque organ, and there is a big guitar-like looking instrument that's very round. That's the theorbo that I referred to earlier in this episode. Let's listen to a little bit of this, maybe. There we are. This is taken at quite a fast tempo. The Baroque organ is what's in the middle. And now on the right-hand side of your screen on the YouTube video. Briefly at the start, but it was maybe a second or two. One difference of these violins from modern ones is there are no chin rests to allow the sound to vibrate more freely. Eventually it's going to open up a little bit more. Given everything that is going wrong with the world today, it's kind of nice to come back and hear music that generally makes most people very happy, and is often played at weddings. open it back up, and this is the Fiordo on the right. The cellist and the Baroque organ are basically just playing chords to provide the harmony, with the other strings handling the melody and the counterpoint. And I'm going to stop it right here, and we'll come back and close out this episode of the Weekly Note. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope that you will tune in for future episodes. For now, I'm Jeff Tilley, and this is the Weekly Note.